If you are looking for this video in Hindi, the link is down there in the description. यदि आप इस वीडियो को हिंदी में देखना चाहते हैं, तो लिंक नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन में है.
In my last video, which was part 1 of this series that I call Indian History 101, we had learned how the Indian peninsula was geographically formed, about the presence of early humans on the subcontinent, and then the 2700 years that comprised of the Indus Valley Civilization and the Vedic Age. And today we will carry on our journey through India's extremely long and complex historical timeline and cover the next 1000 or so years of Indian history from the end of the Vedic Age till the beginning of medieval India. And in case you're forgetting the details or you haven't watched the video, I highly recommend you to watch it first. Links are here and in the description. Namaste my dear friends, I'm Dhruv and welcome to the Indoverse, your one-stop resource for everything India. Just to remind you quickly, I had decided to split India's 5000 plus years history into 12 distinct periods and to cover these in 6 videos. So this is the second video in this series and today we will cover the next 3 periods: Ancient India, Early Classical Period and Late Classical Period. As you must know by now, the Vedic Age gave us tons of ancient and sacred texts and wisdom in the form of the 4 Veds, and this was basically the foundation of India that would form over the next centuries. The next 400 years after the end of the Vedic Age saw a lot of texts and philosophies that were built upon the teachings of the Veds and the dynasties that were built upon the existing dynasties that I had mentioned in the end of the last video, the Janpads. Upanishads were the texts which were written in this period, and they formed the theoretical basis of classical Hinduism, and they were known as Vedanta, which is formed by joining the 2 Sanskrit words Ved and Ant, and it means the conclusion of the Veds. The Upanishads were basically questioning the teaching of the Veds and challenging the ritual. The orthodoxy of the Veds was being challenged more and more due to increased urbanization, and this challenge also led to the rise of new age thinkers and teachers such as Mahavir, the proponent of Jainism, as well as Prince Siddhartha, who is better known as Gautam Buddha, the proponent of Buddhism. The new dynasties that I just mentioned were called Mahajanpads, which in Sanskrit means great realms, and there were 16 of them. They were formed upon the annexation of the Janpads from the previous era by greater kingdoms, and one of the most famous of them was called Magad, which was pivotal in the rise of the future Maurya and Gupta empires that we will soon meet. But if a country is doing so good, then the word is bound to spread and external powers are bound to be attracted. Around 515 BC, the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, crossed the Hindu Kush mountains and ruled over the areas that are part of modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan for around 200 years. Around 500 BC, the ancient University of Takshila was established way before Oxford and Cambridge. It became the largest learning center of the region and allowed for exchange between people from various cultures. The university was particularly renowned for science, especially medicine, and the arts, but both religious and secular subjects were taught, and there were even courses on subjects such as archery or astrology. Then around 330 BC came Alexander the Great, who, after conquering the whole world in his path from ancient Greece and also conquering the aforementioned Achaemenid Empire, defeated the Indian king Porus or Puru and came up till the Hephaestus River, which is nowadays known as the Bias River. But then his tired armies, who were so far from home and had been fighting for years at end now, revolted at the thought of fighting even larger and mightier armies across the rivers, and thus Alexander decided to return, the extremities of his vast empire ending near the west of modern-day India. Meanwhile, around 320 BC, the Great Mauryan Empire came into existence and lasted for around 150 years. It was the first mega empire that unified almost all of India into one state and was the largest empire on the Indian subcontinent. It was founded by Chandragupta Maurya and was succeeded by his son Bindusara and then by his grandson Ashok, who is considered by many to be the greatest Indian ruler of all time. He helped expand the Mauryan Empire till the state of Kalinga, which had never been conquered before. But it is said that he was so devastated after seeing all the death and destruction of this war that he saw war and life in a different light ever since and turned to Buddhism and peace. He was one of the main proponents for the spread of Buddhism in and outside of India. And yes, we haven't forgotten about the southern empires, but we really don't have a lot of evidence in form of documents and scriptures that can give us an idea of what was actually going on in that part of the country at this point of time. And even archaeological evidence starts coming up after this era. But what we can highlight is the Sangam period. During the Sangam period, Tamil literature flourished from the 3rd century BC to the 4th century AD under the rules of 3 Tamil dynasties, the Cheras, the Cholas and the Pandyas, who ruled different parts of southern India. Sangam literature, which deals with the history, politics, war and culture of the Tamil people of this period, was quite revolutionary for its time because the scholars of the Sangam period rose from the common people and they wrote about the problems of the common people as well. This was very different because at that time mostly people wrote about the kings to impress them. Also, unlike Sanskrit writers from the northern India who were mostly Brahmins, Sangam writers came from diverse classes and social backgrounds and were mostly non-Brahmins. They had different faiths, came from different walks of life, and were from professions like farmers, artisans, merchants, monks, priests, and even princes, and quite a few of them were even women. The 800 years between the fall of the Mauryan Empire in the 2nd century BC and the fall of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century AD is known as the classical period of Indian history, which we have further split into early classical and late classical periods. The early classical period saw the rise of many other mega empires as a follow-up to the success and fall of the Mauryan Empire. Art, education, philosophy, and learning prospered during this period, and Hinduism and Buddhism were the two main pillars of faith of this time. Mainland India was ruled by three major kingdoms for the next 500 years. The Shunga Empire, which was a dynasty that was established after overthrowing the last Mauryan emperor, were known for their many wars with both indigenous and foreign powers. They were the first Brahmin kingdom after the Buddhist Mauryas, and some historians hold them accountable for persecuting Buddhists, though some relics at sacred Buddhist sites such as Sanchi also point at Shunga patronage as well. The Satavahan Empire, one of the largest empires post-Mauryas and which also rose from the ashes of the Mauryan dynasty. They were one of the first Indian states to issue coins struck with the rulers embossed. The Kushan Empire, which expanded out of what is now Afghanistan into the northwest of the Indian subcontinent. Their emperor Kanishka was a great patron of Buddhism and is said to have played the part of a second Ashok in the history of Buddhism. The Kushans played an important role in the establishment of Buddhism in India and its spread to Central Asia and China. To note here are the northwestern kingdoms of Indo-Greeks, Indo-Scythians, Indo-Parthians and Indo-Sassanids, from which the Kushan Empire rose. Theirs were hybrid cultures that were very unique, and they also imparted a lot of Greek influence on the India as we know it today, as the Greeks were part of this region since Alexander's conquest and these empires which were an amalgamation of Indian and other cultures. And this exchange happened for around 200 years. Also of importance in this period was the flourishing spice trade and the spread of Buddhism. Kerala was known as the land of spices or as the spice garden of India, and some early writings and some Stone Age carvings even indicate that India's southwest coastal port Muziris in Kerala had established itself as a major spice trade center from as early as 3000 BC. The spice trade in Kerala attracted traders from all over the old world to India. Indian merchants involved in spice trade took their local cuisine to Southeast Asia, where spice mixtures and curries became very popular with the native inhabitants. Meanwhile, Buddhism was transmitted to China via the Silk Road around the 1st century AD. The interaction of cultures resulted in several Chinese travelers and monks to enter India. Buddhism in particular traveled alongside the maritime trade, promoting coinage, art, and literacy along the way. Now we are entering the late classical period, also known as the Golden Age of India, where we saw crystallization of all of these elements that we have been gathering for the last 3500 years of Indian history into what is generally known as Hindu culture. And this happened via great advancements in ancient India science, technology, engineering, art, literature, logic, mathematics, astronomy, religion, and philosophy. Of prominence in this age was the great Gupta Empire, which lasted for around 230 years, and this also rose from the Mahajanpad of Magad, just like the Mauryan Empire had done 600 years before them. The military exploits of the first three rulers, Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, and Chandragupta II, brought much of northern India under the leadership. It was also during this age that the Hindu-Arabic numeral system originated in India and was propagated to the west by the Arabs. It was due to this propagation by the Arabs that the current numeral system that you and I use is known as the Arabic numerals, even though the origin was India. Early Hindu numerals had only 9 symbols until 600 to 800 AD, when a symbol for 0 was developed for the numeral system. The Gupta period also produced scholars such as Kalidas, Aryabhat, Varamir, etc., who made great advancements in many academic fields. As the Gupta Empire was the major empire of northern India, other empires did exist in other parts of India and were at most times allies of the Gupta Empire as well. They can be summed up as follows without going into too much detail. The Vaktak Empire in central India, the Kamrup Kingdom in the northeast, the Pallav Empire existed at the southern edge of the Deccan Plateau, the Kadamba Empire existed next to the Pallavs, and finally, as the Gupta Empire fell around 570 AD, it led to some years of power struggle in the region, after which Harsha established his empire in 606 AD, and he predominantly ruled over northern India for about 40 years. His reign was that of peace and prosperity, and his kingdom attracted scholars, artists, and religious visitors from far and wide. And thus, we have now reached the end of the late classical period of Indian history. as soon after the end of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century AD and the collapse of the Empire of Harsha in the 7th century AD, we enter the early medieval period. As the country had already reached its golden age in the previous period, this was more of a period of power struggle and of shift of power from one kingdom to another. But you will have to wait for my next video to get to know how these power dynamics shifted over the next 3 eras that lasted around 1200 years. And this is also the video in which we will see how India got introduced to Islam for the first time. So that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Thanks for sticking till the end, and here are a few more videos that you might like. You can help my channel grow by hitting that subscribe button and the bell notification icon, by liking this video, leaving comments and sharing this video and my channel. And there are links in the description to many resources that I encourage you to go through and form your own opinion. Thanks again for being here, and see you all next time. Namaste.